We were talking last time about waking up versus growing up, and the way I'm using those terms, and I think that you are also. Waking up is a shift off of the ego mind towards some kind of non-dual and or essential and or soul and or consciousness type of experience that is a non-localized, non-egoic, non-personal field or space or something of awareness, right? And then different than that are these levels, these categories, these aspects of self, of one's person, of one's energy body, et cetera, et cetera. And so you get into this territory when you jump from third to fourth where the use of the word transpersonal, I think it's important to make the distinction. When you shift from third to fourth, you shift from personal to transpersonal. And then, of course, fifth is even more trans than fourth was, and sixth is even more trans. When you shift from the growing up to waking up thing, it's a shift to non-personal. And so that's an important distinction, that non-personal is different than transpersonal, because I think the two get conflated a lot. So transpersonal involves a higher state. Non-personal is more of a non-localized. There's no up or down. It's just, like Ken Wilber uses that analogy of the ladder of consciousness, but the non-dual awareness is when you just sort of jump off the ladder. It's that all that space around that the ladder is existing in. We are all looking from a non-dual awareness quite often. We just don't know it. We're not awake there. We haven't woken up yet, is the idea. So to awaken is to awaken to that perspective or non-perspectival awareness. It's to awaken to that experience. But again, we're all having it. So it's not like, well, if I'm saying I have a certain ability to look from or to even reside in and even experience some sort of self/no self experience in the non-dual, I'm not implying I've climbed all the way to the top of the ladder and then jumped off. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that I think the way it works is that all of us have non-dual awareness available to us at all times, and for various reasons, some of us have actualized that, and I'm using the word actualized to mean we've become aware of it, so to speak, where most people aren't aware of it, if we call it an it. And so actualize is to become aware of, and or to realize it is to become aware as. And I know for myself, and I'm not saying this is rare or something, but just to try to explain these words, to a certain extent, I am aware as it, and I can discern that. I can discern that in my experience that there's not only it's not only when I look in a non-dual way, like, oh yeah, everything looks kind of different, or oh yeah, I feel a certain remove from that which I'm looking at. Even when I'm looking at what I think of as myself, I feel this certain remove. But then it's like, okay, but where is that I'm looking from, right? It's like, where is that? It's like, well, I don't know how to explain it, but I have an experience of where that is, and the answer is everywhere, nowhere, which is paradoxical and weird. But it's a thing, for lack of a better word, it's a thing. And then, at some point, after years of kind of torturous residing in that nothing became enough of a something where I started to experience it as a something instead of more of a nothing. And little by little over time, it's become more and more of a, what, for lack of a better word, I would call a self experience. There's some kind of self in that. And again, I don't know if it's one, whatever the highest number is, one, zillionth of a percent of total, or if it's, I just have no idea. All I know is I'm pretty sure it's just a little bit, compared to whatever 100% would be.
Yeah.
But it makes all the difference in my life. It makes all the difference. When I'm faced with overwhelm, which can happen at any moment, depending on what lens I'm looking from. And generally speaking, just I think the human ego predicament is absolutely tragically overwhelming. The only way to survive it, the only way to not go crazy or just kill myself or just absolutely lose any sense of sanity or coherence, it's like, well, I have that experience of self that's beyond all of it. And not that I'm beyond all of it, but that that quote unquote I, as is the same for everyone else who ever existed, exist in that larger conscious unified space. And so there's just this deep security that comes with that, where it's like, okay, even if all this blows up, then there'll still be that, which is the essence of it all anyway, which just sounds like a cheesy New Age book, but I don't know how else to say it. It's like melting butter, actually.
Yeah, right. You'll always have melted butter.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a good exploration of what you're talking about when you say that that to some extent ego has to give up to soul. And it's not that ego goes away, and it's not that ego, as you're talking about, ego as not as false persona, but as id, or as driving force behind action, that this, as it's supplanted by soul, as it's supplanted by a self that exists outside of it, is I don't want to call it a goal, but definitely is progress, right? Feels like resolution in a way that you'll never find being simply maintaining ego's control over whatever is going on. Sounds nice.
An analogy I like is the idea of seasons, especially living in Minnesota, right? We have such dramatic seasonal change. I mean, you're in California now, but and actually, I don't know if most of our listeners know that, but because I've talked to people and they're like, "Wait, you guys aren't in the same room with each other?" It's like, right. No, I'm in Minnesota, Jeff's in California, but Jeff has spent many years living in Minnesota, so
yeah,
he knows Minnesota weather well. But so with the seasons, this analogy of like the fall comes and leaves start falling off the trees and it moves more and more towards winter. And if you'd never experienced this before, I mean, it would be an absolute apocalypse. And you'd be running around just horrified, and trying to save the trees and keep the leaves on them. And I mean, it just progresses to where it would just seem more and more absolutely horrific that all the greenery goes away and the temperature is dropping and eventually the snow comes and everything ices over, and I mean it's the end. Yeah, it's absolutely the end. And and we all experience this in Minnesota. I mean, the winter wears on long enough, and if you haven't flown somewhere, you know, if you haven't flown south at least once during the winter, you go into the state where you can't even quite remember what spring or summer might feel like.
Every year.
Every year it happens. You know, but then it's this miraculous thing that has absolutely nothing to do with anything you did, right? The temperature or the season changes, and the temperature actually starts to get warmer, and the snow melts, and the leaves and the flowers and the birds and the chipmunks and unfortunately the mosquitoes and the gnats all are reborn. It's like it's a miracle of rebirth that happened. And through it all, you know, if you were running around the whole time trying to figure out how you could reestablish or save or make it how it was back when it was summer, I mean, it's just futile. It's like, get over it. Just accept that winter's going to come and there's a reason for it, and there's certain things that are going to happen, and then summer's going to come again, and it's going to have nothing to do with you or what you did. And that sounds silly, but I think we're all living in a narcissistic enough state to where we all experience that to some degree, that you know, the difficulty, the hardship, the death, the struggle in our lives, that somehow if we were just doing it correctly, or if we could just figure it out, or if we were just trying hard enough, or then it would just be summer all year round. And it's like, that's just not how it works. But it's a big deal to come off it and allow that, you know, again, back to that thing that in a certain way, life's a tragedy. Your ego's not going to win. Your ego's not going to win. And that's to face that. And I'm not saying I've faced it in some 100% way, but as I've talked about before, I've come up against losses that were shattering. And in those shattering losses, meaning shattering to my ego, I'm not saying on some objective scale they were, you know, way up high.
All you've got is your own losses.
All you've got is your own. It was in relation to my ego strength.
Yeah.
They were shattering. And you know, and as most people will tell you, it's in those moments where you get knocked out of your narcissism to a certain degree, and you become aware of other and of world and of the limitations of your ego's powers. And what's also nice is you become aware of what I'm trying to get at with this winter analogy and stuff. One of the big things is that's great. Like, it sucks that you don't get to rule the universe the way we were hoping. If you just did enough push-ups and, you know, ate enough of the perfect diet, you know, you could rule the universe. On the flip side of that, you become aware that you're off the hook for being responsible for the fucking universe, you know? Mm. You become aware that, you're off the hook even for managing yourself to a certain degree. You know, it's like, get over it. You're not as in control as you were trying to be. And there's wisdom in that. And if you can allow soul or consciousness or God or, you know, whatever down in from above, you also have the experience that there's grace. You know, this grace experience, this forgiveness experience, this redemption experience that's so common.
And just profoundly necessary because the light exposes the dark, right? Like the grace experience, if it wasn't there, none of this would be possible. And that sounds like cliche too, but there are the things that we fear are also things we feel we need to be forgiven for.
Right. Yes, right. Yeah, and those things aren't you.
Right.
But since we think they're us, then we think we need to be forgiven. But we also think that it's absolutely unforgivable.
Right.
We just wish it could be, but we certainly won't forgive ourselves for it. And I think the ego mind's not capable of it.
Well, it's built up in defense of acknowledging it. Like that's its function. But,
yeah. Which is why it often takes trauma to smack it out of the way and reveal the darkness.
Consciousness can do a lot more with trauma than it can with, repression. Or I don't know what I'm trying to say, but like I liked what you said, that trauma smacks it out of the way. That there are too many potential losses out there to not eventually have to face the fact that it's to not eventually wake up,
Yeah. And just point of clarification, you said consciousness or light exposes the dark.
Yeah.
And I know what you mean by that, but just to get picky about words, the way I tend to, the point that I'm making is that the light can't get at the dark unless the ego reveals it. The ego's standing between the light and the dark. And the ego ideally reveals it. Now, the ego usually won't choose to. That's what I'm saying. Trauma typically has to smack it into doing it.
Okay, I hear the distinction you're making. Yeah.
And then, of course, you find out that, not of course, but generally speaking, the spiritual insight is that, and then when dark and light meet, the light wins. It's not, darkness doesn't extinguish the light.
Right.
But the ego thinks it's going to. Like when you dig down deep enough, you'll find that your ego thinks that if not for you, defending against evil would rise up and extinguish the light.
Right. It's like the person like keeping people like, trying to stop a fight, holding
right.
Holding people back on either side. Both things are a lot bigger than it. But it's like, this tiny voice in the middle. It's like, no, it's fine. It's fine. Just everybody cool off.
Yeah. So again, that was a jump from talking about fourth chakra, but I think it's it gets confusing right in there as far as, is one having a fourth chakra experience or is one having a non-dual experience? Because they both are a departure from the personal, from the purely personal.
The transpersonal versus non-personal is where it kind of leapt off from. I think that was a good distinction. And so it's good segue back to, if we're going to try to just kind of touch on definitely the sixth and seventh, as those, you describe them as, being even more transpersonal than the fourth. It's like degrees of transpersonal, which I thought was a good framing that we hadn't said before.
So if the word personal is referring to an individual personal perspective, right? The idea is that third chakra is the pinnacle of that, where one ends up in experiencing self as a point in three-dimensional space. That's the quote-unquote person. And is juxtaposed either cooperatively or not against everything else. So the idea of awareness, of attention orienting from a perspective that is not that, then you have either non-personal and or transpersonal awareness, meaning your lens is no longer from a personal perspective. And so any level above the third then is considered transpersonal, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. So as we were saying, when you shift to the fourth, there's this experience there's more unity, there's more love, there's more compassion, there's more of a sense of of being one with your what previously seemed like an absolute other, meaning providing you weren't merging or projecting or object relating with that other, which no one's ever 100% done that. Right. So, but let's say you were 100% individuated at the third chakra level. Then this person that you're relating with is an absolute other. But then when you shift to fourth, then there becomes this awareness that they aren't as separate or as different or as outside of self as you thought they were. And what you also, again, these are such simplified concepts, but in the same way that the second chakra, the motivations and the experience was what we call emotional. The fourth chakra seems more emotional and less mental than the third, right? It's more of a feeling-based experience rather than a bunch of concepts and thoughts. Another delineation is you'll hear that it's more feminine, so, right? So first chakra is masculine, second chakra is feminine, third chakra is masculine, fourth chakra is feminine. There's a back and forth. So then when you shift up into fifth, then it's masculine again. Fifth is more structured again. Fifth is more, it's abstract thought, but it's thought, right? It's more what we would put in that category of thought. And again, once you get up there, then at least for myself, I'm more and more at a loss to experience to describe what the experience of those dimensions is like, because I wouldn't know or I wouldn't know how to describe it. But again, just as far as listing the qualities that you tend to hear about it, and if I try to put some words to my vague sense of it, again, fifth chakra is more of an abstract thought, higher philosophical, esoteric kind of thinking. When you get into the sixth chakra, it becomes the word psychic tends to get used, and it's psychic vision. It's seeing, knowing psychically. So it ceases to be thinking, and it's more of a seeing or a visioning it's like a lens that is capable of seeing in a way that none of the lower chakras are capable of. And then when you shift to the seventh, then it becomes, then the word that often gets used is that it's a knowing. Now the experience is a wisdom or a knowing, and not by way of deductive reasoning, or not by way of inductive reasoning, not by way of even seeing. It's just knowing. Knowing without seeing, knowing without thinking, knowing without reasoning, knowing without feeling, knowing without empathizing, knowing without experiencing. There's just the knowing seems to be there. And of course that doesn't match our third chakra understanding, because from a third chakra level, it's like, how the hell would you know? You weren't there, you didn't experience it, no one told you about it, you haven't seen it. How would you know? And it's like, well, my seventh chakra knows, but so does yours, and so does everyone's seventh chakra, is the idea.
So it starts a lot of fights.
Yeah. And then, of course, it's okay, my seventh chakra knows, but then, it has to make its way down into my conceptual mind if I'm actually going to try to put words to it. And then the question is, how distorted is it by the time it comes out of my mouth? Which is why I'm always saying to clients, and the same goes for this podcast, it's like everything I'm saying, I'll get criticized because I have a lot of seventh chakra. My seventh chakra is quite open. Like if you do, have you ever done that thing where you take a pendulum and hang it over the chakras and it'll actually start spinning?
I haven't done it, but I know what you're talking about.
Well, I wasn't surprised when I did it, and the seventh one's just spinning like crazy, which again isn't some wonderful thing. It's like the common.
It's like you got a leak.
Yeah, it's more like a leak, which again I attribute mainly to a head injury and or a series of head injuries is why my seventh chakra is so open. I don't know what the karmic or, reasons are, but on a real physical level, it's because of a head injury.
We never heard the stories about all of your, apparently you've broken your nose a bunch, you've jumped off of roofs, and you have multiple head injuries, but we never got those.
Yeah, a lot of broken bones. But yeah, so there's a lot of seventh chakra awareness, seventh chakra energy, and so some of the symptoms of that, if you will, there's assets of that. But if I just talk symptoms of that, that like if when you read about it, a word that is often there is that someone who's got a seventh chakra that's too open, there's going to be an arrogance because they think they know, because their seventh chakras has so much energy going. And so they literally feel like they know, and or a lot of times, they do have a certain amount of knowing, but again, that doesn't mean they're correct or accurate all the time. But it's sort of like energetically, via our subtle field, we can energetically flex on each other. We're doing it constantly, right? In various ways, people are. It's just which chakra are you flexing on everyone? Because we all do it. And I have a tendency to flex my seventh chakra, just meaning it expands, I take up space, and I operate from there, and I'll speak from there. There can be this experience as though I'm speaking from spiritual authority, like in some movie where some sorcerer is like trying to be a dark lord or something,
Moses.
or like Moses, and it's it's one of those things where it's like I'm just trying to have fun arguing that the Vikings are gonna beat the Packers or something, but there's all this seventh chakra energy coming in, and the other person's like, "Fuck you."
It's like, have you seen Kirk Cousins? There's no.
So it can be a sense of arrogance. It can also be an aloofness. It's very easy for me to just pop up and kind of hang out up there, and I'm really just doing as a defense to escape certain threats or insecurities down below. But it can seem like a arrogant aloofness or a withdrawal, which it is. But that's not like my main intention with it, Or in the last episode when I was doing that throat chakra thing, to come down in, when I was saying I'm coming down into my throat chakra with my attention, it's like I can't help but pull a lot of seventh chakra energy down into that. And I feel that conflict. I feel that it's like, man, to open up my fifth and integrate it with my seventh, it's like that's a lot of seventh chakra energy to try to integrate with my fifth. And so I work with that balance, and I notice that, okay, if I can really close that seventh chakra off more, it's like, oh, that's a big relief. Now my fifth chakra stands a chance, So that, again, it gets into the relationship between the chakras and how most people don't realize how much one chakra can be kind of in conflict with another chakra. And so you do all this work on the one, but you don't realize that one of these other chakras is actually really working against you in that regard.
If you want to learn more about the Dimension Approach, please visit dimensionapproach.com.